Israel's caretaker Prime Minister Yair Lapid is in Paris for first one-to-one talks with the French President Emmanuel Macron. Macron received Lapid at the Élysée Presidential Palace, where the leaders embraced each other and waved at the cameras. The talks will largely focus on the revival of the 2015 nuclear deal between world powers and Iran, while taking into account the interests of regional partners, including Israel. Speaking at the briefing, Macron said that the people of Israel are lucky to have Lapid as their new prime minister.
Israel's government and its people and the entire country are very lucky to have you as their leader. Never forget that here in Paris, you're a loyal friend attached to the security of Israel, but especially to its success within the region. And this success, we both know, goes through the path of peace. It's demanding and difficult, but I have the intimate and deep conviction that you will have in you all the resources to lead your country there and beyond.
You were right then, and you're even more right today. The current situation cannot continue as it is. It will lead to a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, which would threaten world peace. We must all work together to stop that from happening.
After Lapid took over the premiership on Friday, he was confronted with his first test a day later, as Lebanon's Hezbollah movement launched 3 drones towards an offshore gas field in the eastern Mediterranean. Condemning the attack, Lapid said Hezbollah is continuing on the path of terrorism and is hurting Lebanon's ability to reach an agreement on a maritime border. Israel and Lebanon resumed negotiations on their maritime border in 2020, though Karish gas field sits outside of the disputed area and is marked as Israeli on previous United Nations maps. The US-backed talks have been stalled by Beirut's demands that the UN maps must be modified. The attack by Hezbollah came after Lebanon rejected Israel's claim of a Karish gas field. Talks over Hezbollah will be closely linked with its backer Iran, which is a crucial part of the talks in Paris, as Israel has been firmly opposing the international efforts to revive a nuclear accord with Iran. Israeli officials fear that giving Iran sanctions relief in exchange for curbs on its nuclear program could allow Tehran to boost funding to Hezbollah. And for more updates on this, our correspondent Ross Cullen is joining us live from Paris. Hi Ross, we have seen that the President and the Prime Minister are friends, but how significant is this visit for both Israel and France?
Yes, the two men, Emmanuel Macron and Yair Lapid, are meeting in the Élysée Palace, just around the corner from where I am here in central Paris this afternoon, to discuss a range of international security issues, notably, of course, the war in Ukraine, top of the agenda, and the effects of that conflict, particularly on food security and the risk as well for the region and the wider European region as well, taking in the Mediterranean and Israel's response, of course, as well. Looking at the Iran nuclear deal, if that could be improved, if that could be revived as well, and the Palestinian question as well, peace for Palestine, of course, that's going to be on the agenda as well when the two men meet, but specifically also the bilateral relationship and looking at the accords between Israel and France, committed, firm allies, and also working together when it comes to security.
Ross, what should we look out for during Lapid's France tour? What are the other agendas, both hidden and on paper?
Yeah, the main agendas, of course, is going to be security, specifically in Israel. We know that there have been recent issues when it comes to looking for peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And Emmanuel Macron is a player in the region. We were just touching on Lebanon before you came to me as well. We know that Emmanuel Macron paid that visit just days after the port explosion in the Lebanese capital, Beirut, almost 2 years ago, August 2020. He is a player in the region. He's been to Iraq as well for that Baghdad Security Conference, and France is one of those signatories to the Iran nuclear deal as well. So security would be high on the agenda for the meeting between Mr. Macron and Mr. Lapid, and then the wider issues as well, maybe not specifically involving Israel, but specifically involving France when it comes to being a NATO member, being an EU member, and we're discussing the war in Ukraine and what the kind of impact that's having in Europe, and then the wider European and Mediterranean region.
Live from Paris, thank you very much, our correspondent Ross Cullen. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.